What is going on? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, live here on AMP. Live here on AMP. What is up, my people? Glad to have you around. Glad to be seen. Glad to be heard, most importantly, on AMP. Baker Mayfield, baby. He's back and alive. Let's roll. I'm John Middlekauff. This is the 3 and Out podcast. Make sure you subscribe below. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the Volumes YouTube page. Has a bunch of other shows. Colin Cowherd, Richard Sherman, no big deal. This is the 3 and Out podcast. Make sure you subscribe down below in the description. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like I said. And some thoughts here on this Thursday night barn burner starting with Baker Mayfield. And I would say he's become and had become and really was one of the most polarizing players in the NFL. And let's face it, for the last 2 years, it has been a complete disaster for the guy, right? The last year in Cleveland was really ugly. Now, he was injured, but the team did not like him. The players clearly didn't, because when he got traded, they didn't have many positive things to say. And Stefanski and the general manager, Andrew Berry, were clearly not big fans either. They were over it. And they were ready to move on well before the Deshaun Watson thing ever became not only available, but like a destination to Cleveland. They were off Baker Mayfield for whatever reason. I don't have any inside sources there. It's just clear they had enough of the guy. They did not like each other. And then he goes to Carolina and you could make the argument statistically, Zach Wilson would throw up his hand. He was one of the worst quarterbacks, if not the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. And it led to his coach getting fired, which wasn't totally his fault. The guy was on the hot seat coming into the year. But Baker Mayfield was not good with the Carolina Panthers. And we had all just kind of acknowledged, former number 1 overall pick, he's just not good enough. This is not going to work. And then this week, he gets his release, gets waived. The Rams pick him up. Right move. The Rams, look who they're playing with. Aaron Donald's on the sideline. Cooper Kupp's on the sideline. Matt Stafford's on the sideline. Jalen Ramsey's getting cooked. They are dependent on 4 players. 3 of them in street clothes. The other guy's not having a great season. So you go, why not? The only way, coming into this game, the Detroit Lions had the 3rd overall pick because that's where the Rams are drafting. So they don't have their 1st-round pick. They have nothing to lose. McVay kind of needs a project to get going. It made some sense. But then when the game started, you're like, well, I was hoping they would start him, but I understood when Walford came running out. And then McVay went to the bullpen immediately. Now, I'm recording this. McVay probably talking to the media. Maybe that was the plan all along. Maybe he just said, screw it. There obviously are some parallels and similarities and basically the same offense that Stefanski a couple years ago and McVay runs, even though McVay has definitely become more pass happy. But the boots and the Shanahan zone running scheme is something that Baker Mayfield's familiar with. Now, that being said, to come in on 2 days of work and be able to lead one of the worst teams in football, arguably beside the Texans, the worst team in football. That team is not good. To a win against a team that has a star pass rusher, a really good quarterback, arguably the 1st or 2nd best wide receiver. They got some good players on the Raiders, and they had been playing good football. To beat them, when the game's going on, especially once we go to the second half, I start thinking about my angles and my takes. And my take was going to be, before that game-winning drive, what a night for Baker Mayfield. What an incredibly positive night. At worst, if he can just play competent football, which he had, and he ended up being 22 of 35, for a couple hundred yards and obviously the game-winning touchdown. But even if the game-winning touchdown had not taken place and he had ended up 18 of, 30 or whatever, he had a real NFL game. That's what an NFL quarterback looks like. Maybe a backup, maybe a fringe starter, but a guy that can play in the league. Now, to be a backup, maturity matters, and that's been a big knock on him. A lot of teams, if you're going to be Josh Allen, if you're going to be Patrick Mahomes, if you're going to be Justin Herbert, if you're going to be some of these guys backup, Matt Stafford, they want a grown-up. And if Baker Mayfield can play like that and then around Sean McVay be a grown-up, he can resurrect his career, or he can just extend his career, because it was trending before the Rams waived him. Is this guy going to be out of the league? Is this guy going to be out of the league fast? And then he has a night like tonight, And Sean McVay, a Super Bowl champion, one of the higher level coaches. I give the Rams a lot of credit. Even before they won the game, they played their ass off. And really, beside Bobby Wagner and Jalen Ramsey, and Baker Mayfield's famous, though he has not good, they're playing with a lot of randos. I mean, their left tackle, Herb Street's describing him. He's been to like several different leagues. It's like, no wonder they're getting work. And they just tried really, really hard. And that is a mark of a good coach. This is beyond the season for hell from them, especially when you factor in they're coming off the Super Bowl, and they tried hard. But ultimately in football, it's one thing to try. It's another thing to execute the offense. It's another thing to drive the field, and they struggle with that a lot of the game. And then those last couple drives, Baker Mayfield, honestly, I don't want to say brilliant, but he was just really, really good. And for a guy that's been really, really bad, that's a huge positive. And now the only thing he needs to do the rest of the season is just act like a grown-up around the operation. Show up early, stay late, be a sponge. And sometimes, like, we always think, when you get traded or you get cut or you get fired or something goes wrong that you get humbled. That doesn't happen to everybody. Some of us, when something bad happens, and whether we're on top of the world or things are going well, we get humbled. Some people don't. And it might take some people to stumble several times. Humility might even be the wrong word, just to do some introspection and go, I need to change. Something like, I can't keep throwing the same pitch. I need to do something else that might work. And maybe it took Baker Mayfield from being traded to the Carolina Panthers and then forcing his release, in a second jersey of the season to go, you know what? I got nothing to lose. I'm going to come in here bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, work my ass off, and just see where the chips might, fall. You're right. I'm going to give my all from a personality standpoint and from a football standpoint. And from a football standpoint, the dude played a high-level game. And the Raiders' defense isn't good, but that's withstanding, right? Notwithstanding. He showed up on Tuesday afternoon. I mean, Wednesday, that's pretty crazy. And he's not playing. Cooper Kupp and Marshall Faulk and Todd Gurley ain't walking through that door. Isaac Bruce. I mean, this ain't the greatest show on turf. He's dealing with Skoranek and Van Jefferson, who's back from injury, and Tutu Atwell, which I'm pretty sure I was watching the Red Zone a couple weeks ago. He caught a touchdown, and Siciliano's like, breaking news, Tutu Atwell just scored the first touchdown of his NFL career. He's not a rookie. So the team he was dealing with, listen, to watch McVay's excitement as a football fan, like, that was fun. That was for a game that for a lot of it, it's like, oh my God, this game sucks. Not going to complain about having to watch football for a living, but God, this game's boring. And then to have that happen, it's a little bit like Monday night. It's like, God, I got to watch this game. And then Tom Brady just goes to go. Tonight, it's like, oh, this. And then Baker Mayfield feels like resurrects his career in like 2 drives. Like, that's why we watch. It's the ultimate reality television. You never actually know what's going to happen, right? And that's what makes pro sports so much fun, and just sports in general. Pro sports, because these guys become big personalities. They have ups, they have downs, like Baker Mayfield. Part of what makes tonight so cool is how low it had been for Baker Mayfield, how low it had been for the Rams. Right. And the Raiders had been playing well. So that was really, really fun. And my take on the Raiders was going to be, I've said this forever. And really, if you play, I've always said, like, after the first month, so starting early October, if you are the road team and you win a Thursday night football game, this is not college football. You don't get extra credit for, blowing teams out or keeping the game close. Just win the game, move on. You can go 12-5. And have 12 one-point victories, and you are the 2 seed. So all you got to do is win. And when you're the road team, in December, I care nothing how it looks. It does not matter. If you go on the road on a Thursday night game around Thanksgiving or after and win the game, that is a massive, massive win. And it felt like, God, the Raiders are going to win this game. They're going to be 6-7. They're going to get a long week to the Patriots. And there is a roadmap to them competing for the 7 seed. That ended tonight. And I think you'd have to quantify this year as, once you make a big trade for Devontae Adams, once you extend Derek Carr, you extended Hunter Renfrow and Waller, who have been injured. Max Crosby's had an excellent season. Max Crosby's a beast. And to be 5-8, they still play the Chiefs. They still play the 49ers. I mean, next week, the Patriots, that's no guaranteed win. I mean, this year is a failure for the Raiders. It's not a Denver level failure. It's not a Rams level failure, but it's a pretty big disaster because you don't have that much history in the last couple of decades of success. So ultimately, this game and this result and this season where you're destined to be under 500 again is kind of who you are, who you have been. I think last season with Derek and those guys rallying together and them getting to the playoffs and them, playing a competitive game. A lot of people act like that Cincinnati game, like it was close at the end. The game during the game was not that close. Like Cincinnati was the much better team. But the Raiders, you never apologize for just making the playoffs and losing the first round. They have 2 playoff appearances in 20 freaking years. Like, they've been a disaster as a franchise. And there was a ton of momentum. I bought the hype. And a lot of people out there on the streets call me a Raider hater. They think I have some personal vendetta against the franchise. They think that I root for them to lose. I was the guy who picked them to make the playoffs this year, who picked them to be really good, who thought Josh McDaniels was a home run hire. I'm like, this thing is not just going to work. And then the offseason, they get Devontae fucking Adams. I'm like, Jesus, is this an 11-win team? I mean, they are going to struggle potentially to win 7 games. Just an utter ultimate disaster. It's why we talk about the Chargers a lot. The reason everyone's so hard on Brandon Staley, when you have a competent quarterback and you're paying, the Chargers aren't even paying him yet. You got to make the playoffs. Like, say what you want about the Ravens, a lot of ups and downs. Now Lamar's injured. They make the playoffs every year. You just make the playoffs. Obviously, they didn't last year, actually, because he was injured. But you know what I mean? They're going to make the playoffs again. Like, you just make the playoffs, and the Raiders just don't. And now they got all this star power, like legitimate star power. Max Crosby is a high-end pass rusher. Devontae Adams is between him, Tyreek Hill, and Justin Jefferson, best wide receiver in the league. Derek Carr is a top 12-ish quarterback. Josh Jacobs, stud. Are we sure Josh McDaniels that good? Like, are we sure? Because everyone's like, you're going to give them credit now. They've won 3 games in a row. Well, you can't be losing to Baker Mayfield when he showed up on Tuesday. Think about this. Josh McDaniels has 2 losses this year that you could argue, given the circumstances, are, 2 of the worst losses of the league. He lost to Jeff Saturday's debut. Jeff Saturday hasn't not won since. The Cowboys just beat him like 75-2 the other day. And he just lost to Baker Mayfield, who showed up on Tuesday. Let's face it. Anyone listening to this, if you're coach and you had a decent squad with some talent, lost those 2 games, hard to forget that. Now, I know Mark Davis gave him the dreaded vote of confidence. He's my guy. That's why we signed the contract. I believe in him. Those 2 losses are hard. I miss this. My producer, James, like, you see Ice Cube showing the peace sign with Mark Davis. Ice Cube is one of the biggest Raider fans going. Obviously, an LA guy, comes to the game, big deal, sitting with Mark Davis. Mark Davis entertaining Ice Cube, and you witness that. Van Jefferson catching a game-winning touchdown. Like that is a kick in the nuts. That is, for as cool as the Baker win was, and it was, right? Whenever you get some historic, I know it's not historic, but like based on this season, that's one of the more bigger wow wins of the season. Well, on the flip side, that's one of the bigger holy shit losses of the year. That loss tonight is worse than the Jeff Saturday loss. Honestly, it might not be close. They were up 16-3 in the fourth quarter. Even that final drive, the Rams did not have any timeouts. They had no timeouts. And hell, look what happened on that final drive. Max Crosby destroys Baker Mayfield, sacks him, great sack. Chandler Jones comes in too. And what happens? The defensive tackle hits the ball out of his hands. Like, Josh McDaniels, he's supposed to be this Belichick guy. What's Belichick big on? Details, not screwing up, not biting yourself, not screwing up, controlling what you control. That's just moronic. That was, what are you doing? That gave him 15 yards of life. And then from there, they just worked the ball down the field. And I don't know, man. The Raiders, I bought in originally, and then they kind of sucked me back in their 3-game winning streak, even though they haven't really beat anybody. And that's the Raiders franchise, man. They will humble you fast because they just lose a lot, man. They really, really do. That's that might be an all-timer tonight.